It is a great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Isobel Mackenzie. Let me say a few words about Isobel's biography. Isobel served as the Seniors Advocate for the province of BC for 10 years, between 2014 and 2024. She produced, in that role, over 30 public reports, prompting legislation change and policy changes across a wide spectrum that affects seniors programming in BC. She's a recognized national authority on issues related to various areas, and those were reflected in her media and conference presentations, I believe over 100 now, 101 as of today. And talking about a range of very important seniors issues, social issues, healthcare issues, and certainly those related to community-based services for older adults. Prior to her appointment as Seniors Advocate, she served as CEO of BC's largest not-for-profit, serving over 6,000 seniors in housing, home care, long-term care, etc. Currently and recently, she has become an adjunct professor in the gerontology department here at Simon Fraser University, and we're very happy that she's here. And her talk today is The Wants and Needs of BC Seniors and the Role of Advocacy, a Reflection. Isobel.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back. I think this is probably about my 5th or 6th Friesen conference that I've attended. I've spoken at some, I've been an attendee at others. I was reflecting back that my first Friesen conference actually was prior to my role as Seniors Advocate, when Gloria Gutman had me come over and talk about the home care program, which at that point I was running over on Vancouver Island. So I've certainly watched as this conference has grown, and certainly am very, very grateful for the work that the Department of Gerontology does at Simon Fraser University. It's well respected, it's well known, and the Friesen Conference is but one of the things that the department does to broaden the knowledge to the community at large. Now, one of the things that Andrew didn't talk on was of the many things that people do say about me. Not all are flattering, but certainly many, many people comment on my candor, which is generally code for make sure legal reviews her presentation, which we clearly failed to do for Carl yesterday. But those of you who were here yesterday will know what I'm referencing. But I'm going to take an opportunity to reflect back, not just on my years as Seniors Advocate, but I came to that role after 2 decades in basically community-based services. And to see how when you're on one side, it looks a certain way. When you get to the other side, it looks another way. And to try and understand each other's wants and needs, and how they sometimes conflict, and how sometimes they can come together in a synergistic way and produce better things for the seniors that live in our community. Throughout the presentation, I guarantee you that some in this room will be uncomfortable with what I say, and will be able to detect the collective contraction of sphincter muscles that will be happening at certain times. But it is important to understand and hear and appreciate different perspectives even when we don't agree, or maybe we do kind of agree, but that's not really what we want to do or we need to have. It's really important, and we're losing a bit of that. And I think it is important for us to remember that we need to listen to what people have to say and not simply react to what they have to say. I do want to recognize a couple of people. So nothing at SFU Gerontology happens without, of course, recognizing Gloria Gutman. And everybody will applaud their admiration for her. It's the Order of Canada, the honorary doctorate from the University of Western Ontario, the Order of British Columbia, the 5 years as the president of the International Gerontology Association, hiring Andrew Wister. Oh, wait a minute. No, that was the Mulligan. Okay, so everyone gets one. But what I admire most about Gloria is the heels. And wait a minute, it gets better. It's not just the heels. It's running in the heels for the elevator after one very full glass of wine and beating me to the button for the 7th floor. So please, thank you for coming to hear me, Gloria, this morning, and always a pleasure to see you and so many other friends in the audience. So, okay, as seniors advocate, you're always asked, what do seniors want? And I always say, well, that's a very easy question to ask, and it's a very difficult question to answer. And why is it difficult to answer? Well, because, guess what? Seniors are like everybody else. They have different wants, different needs, different hopes, different aspirations. They come from different experiences. They want different experiences. There is no singular answer to that question. And we need to remember that, because we often have singular answers to these questions. And we need to think about what we're actually saying if we take a group of people who share only one characteristic in common, age, and only one characteristic of age, they're over 65, and we say there's an answer to the question, what do they want or need? If we did that with any other group of people, based on their color, their culture, their religion, whatever, and we said that there's a singular answer to that question, society wouldn't tolerate that. So we need to reflect and remember. Some people want financial security. Some people want to leave a legacy for their children. So it's different. And the other challenge is that there's change across the aging continuum. Why? And so when many people start out, and from my now 30 years of working with seniors, 20 of them working actually directly with seniors and their families and planning their services and all of those other kinds of things, what you see is that actually most of us will go through a continuum, but the amount of time we're going to spend at each stop along that continuum may be long, may be limited, right? We know that we have compressed morbidity for some people. You only have 2 frail days before you die. Other people may have 10 years before, right? But there is sort of this, and so we start out generally, it's about self-fulfillment, right? We want to be valued, we want to be involved, we want to be contributing, we want to be learning. And for many people, that is almost the entirety of their aging journey. There's the bucket list, and it's different for everybody. There are angels out there whose bucket list is about helping other people. Most of us mere mortals have a bucket list about helping ourselves. Right? I want to do the travel. I want to learn new skills. I want to master my bridge game. I want to, be the pickleball champion. All about me and not. But you have that. Then somewhere along the line, you start thinking about maintaining independence. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You don't really start to think about it as an individual until you're worried about it. And you're not worried about it in the you might be worried in the abstract. You're not worried about it until that first moment you can't do something you want to do. For some of us, that will come in the final days of our life, and we may be 98. For others of us, it may come at 66. For some, it comes much younger. And I don't think those of us who've never had that moment can truly understand it. We think we can. I don't know what it would be like to need to go to the toilet and not be able to do that unless somebody helped me. I think I can. I know it's important to help people. I know all of those things, right? Cognitive function. So you sort of think a little bit, oh, I forgot this. You don't really worry about it until you can't figure something out. That's different. You know, there's a different thing, oh, I can't recall her name, oh, I've got to look it up. Oh, you can make the jokes about the things because you can go and look. That's fundamentally different from, I can't figure this out anymore, and I used to be able to. And again, I don't think those of us who have not experienced that know what that's like, and the fear that that might create in a person. Then, at some point, it's about maintaining dignity. Again, we don't think about that. First of all, dignity is different for different people. For some people, maintaining dignity is about being perfectly groomed, always on time, always saying the right thing, never. For other people, dignity is about being able to completely express themselves, completely live on their own very loud terms, and turning the social order upside down. It's a different, but at its base, the dignity is, I'm living the way I want, I'm making my own decisions. Probably, as I look around, I put my glasses back on. Everybody in this room probably has their personal dignity. And so what you start to think about that when people start telling you what you have to do, and here's the clue, because I tell my daughter what she has to do. Her dignity's not impugned because she doesn't do it. Because as she will remind me, I don't have to. What about when you have to? Because you're depending on them. So think about, I can say no, oh, you're doing something I don't like. The vulnerability that some people begin to experience, not all, as they get frailer, erodes that confidence to express themselves. Because what they fear is that in expressing themselves, they will be denied something they need. They can't provide everything for themselves anymore. Closeness to family and friends. The other thing that you can see happen, and the most recent one, some of you may have read about the tragic passing of Marc Garneau. And his story is like everybody else's. In the final weeks or months, it's about the family, right? Not the friends and the people you would normally. And you can see that family becomes more important to people, and sometimes that can be challenging for friends who've been very close to people. But there is a difference. Sometimes friends are the substitute for family, but there is a difference. And then life on quote unquote my terms. And we really need to think about that because then it links back to the dignity. I am personally offended, I have to tell you, by the idea that the only way to die with dignity is to end my own life. I'm not saying that that's not what I would opt to do. I'm not saying that I disagree with the right to do that. But who are we to say that the way to live a dignified life is before you become a burden, before you can insert all of these things? What about the person who thinks the dignity of life is grabbing every last breath they can? What's wrong with that? It may not be my choice. It may not be my choice. But I shouldn't impugn the values of somebody who's choosing something different from not only what I want, but what I think everybody should have a right to choose, which is different from saying, as you get to a certain point, it's no longer of value. I was at a dinner party with somebody who believed that very strongly in not just the right to end their own life when they wanted to, and I think that in the abstract most of us would agree with that. The question is, what is the role of the state in all of that? But when you sort of push back and you say, wasn't that the theory of the eugenics board? I just heard the sphincter muscles contracting, by the way. Think about it. We said certain lives have value and certain lives don't. Same principle, different end of the age spectrum. So we start to think about a lot of that, and ending life on my own terms is not necessarily code for I want MAID. It can also be code for I'm going to go out on my own terms. I'm going to fight for every last breath, right? And we need to think about that. The other thing that, as I reflect on not just the services that we provided, but also, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is the role of government, is how what happens in this aging process is my want is your need, or my want today becomes my need tomorrow. So, cleaning the house. Do I want to clean my house? No. Do I need someone to clean my house? Frankly, no. Now, my mother will tell you I do, but the fact is I can clean a house. The fact I don't is another story. But I can, right? But I may not be able to at some point, right? So what I want, and this can get conflated, certainly amongst policymakers when they start to, and this was talked about a lot yesterday by different panelists in different ways, this sort of the antecedent of needing to recognize, whether you call it the determinants of health or upstream or whatever you want to, but this idea that there are a lot of things that are not part of our medical system that are necessary for some people at some point. But the fact is, they're not necessary for most of us for a large part of our lives, right? Same with taking a taxi or an Uber. Can I walk? Can I take the bus? Can I drive? Yep, okay. It's convenient to take the taxi or but at some point I can't do that. Exercise more. Should I? Yeah. What's the difference between you're getting what I call the vanity exercise, right? I want to just look perfect. Clearly I'm failing in that. But compared to if I don't move at all, my muscles are going to atrophy, and at 95, you decondition much more quickly than at 35, and ironically, we emphasize rehabilitation in 35-year-olds much more vigorously than we do in 75 or 85-year-olds. All you have to do is go and look at GF Strong and look at the people yelling at the young people to, try harder, and then look at how they accept the limitations of the older person. Don't push them, right? So, and ironically, it's more important for the older person to recondition as quickly as possible for a whole host of reasons. Have more money. Probably everybody in this room would like to have more money. Okay, well, having more money is going to allow me to do a little icing on the cake. For some people, having more money is actually going to allow them to eat properly or stay in their own home. And we heard a bit about that yesterday. So, what I want, what I need, not the same. Traveling to see family, sure, I want to do that, right? Okay, what about when family's all I have left? No, my friends have done, right? It's different. Someone to cook for me. My husband's lucked out on this one. But again, a want and a need. And so where did we decide along the way that once a person can no longer cook for themselves, most people actually will probably be able to do it for themselves, but some people can't for a variety of reasons. So at what point did we decide that all they need to eat is a sandwich or soup from a can, because that's all we'll provide? We won't actually prepare a meal anymore. So, you know, we've got this contradiction out there around the importance of fresh fruit, fresh this, fresh vegetables, right? And then, oh, whoops, well, now that you're in your dotage, the processed food is fine, right? Someone to remind me to take my medications, right? Dosettes work fine. My daughter is horrified when she saw it's vitamin pills, but in any event, it's you know, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, recoiled. Okay, do I need it? No, but it's convenient. But at some point, first of all, my medications may actually be necessary instead of really what is a placebo, I assume, with these vitamins I'm taking. And, you know, how are we dealing with that? And here's another conflict that's out there. And those of you who have worked directly in personal care situations and will understand this. The desire to do things myself and the desire for someone to do things for me. And some people are very happy to let other people do things for them. We like them. They're easy. They're compliant. Other people want to do things for themselves. We don't like them. Do you know why? Do you know how long it takes for 87-year-olds to get dressed in the morning by themselves? Do you know how long it takes for a 91-year-old to eat? Forever. I just want to move on. It's just going to be so much easier for me to do it for them. I see some teachers in the room, retired teachers. That's not the way we deal with the children, right? We have infinite patience because we're teaching them how to do it. We're giving them the time to do it. What happened over the age spectrum? And we rationalize it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so who's responsible for what? Government isn't responsible for everything. Can't solve all your problems, and you want to be very careful if they promise they will. So, I have personal responsibility. Okay, I gotta exercise, I gotta eat properly, I gotta drink in moderation. I've got to plan for the future, right? I've got to think about, I'm gonna get older, what is that gonna look like? How much money, where am I gonna live? How am I, you know, there is a degree of personal responsibility for that. Government can't actually move our muscles for us. And then what's our role as just individuals in society? Making time for older adults in our life, showing patience, understanding needs and changes as we age. You know, there was a lot of talk yesterday about isolation and loneliness, and you know, and we have the list of, you know, the government's going to fund all of these things to ameliorate isolation and loneliness. Government can't solve that problem. It is us. It is about what we choose to do to isolate ourselves and how we are isolating older people in our society. I think Andrew talked on this, hit on it a little bit in some of his remarks yesterday. You can be in a room full of people and be lonely. Trust me, I've been in some of those rooms, and you feel lonely. You can be completely alone and not feel lonely. Just simply putting people in a room with other people is not going to solve their loneliness. We did a survey, we've done two now, previous, I can't keep saying we. Every care home. So you go in and you ask them a whole bunch of questions. Anyhow, long story short, these people are living with people around them all. Every meal, they're surrounded by people. Some of them even have roommates. Guess what? They're lonely. They're surrounded by other people and they're lonely. And why are they lonely? Well, first of all, because there's nobody they have anything in common with. Because we throw people together based on their condition. The other thing is the care staff, they're competent. They feel safe. That's all great. Nobody's asked their opinion or their help. Why? Because it's quicker to do it. Everybody needs a purpose in life. And be careful about sometimes you get up every morning and you open the curtains. If that's your purpose, that's your purpose. You can't, if you default to suddenly I'm at an all-inclusive for the next 30 years, it's not going to work. So, we need to think about our roles. Think about, if I was more clever with PowerPoints, which I am clearly not, I would have an image up there. I did try this. By the way, you got to pay this iStock fee or something. I'm going to talk to the department about that. So I'd have a picture up there of a family Thanksgiving dinner with Grandma, and I would show everybody's talking to everybody. They brought Grandma to the dinner. They check. Nobody's talking to her. Right? She's with her family, but it's just, that's not who, she can't. There are lots of families where that doesn't happen. There's lots of families that don't realize it's happening. And if they did, they'd be horrified. Right? It's a gain. What is our responsibility as an individual? Modernization, every action has a reaction. So this is great. We can do our banking online, we can order our groceries online, we can do all of these things. We're busy, we're working, all of that. Okay, guess what? Now we're not working. Those were interactions with people. That interaction's not there. We are human beings at the end of the day who have this need. Now, how much interaction an individual needs differs by individual. I think might have somebody yesterday who was talking about the isolation and loneliness. Slide number 1 would be the lyrics of the song from Funny Lady. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. And the next slide would be Jean-Paul Sartre, hell is other people, right? So, we have to respect that some people enjoy their own company. My joke is people would say to me, make sure you make time for yourself. And I would say, actually, I prefer to spend my time with other people. But we've got to recognize that as well. And certainly around the combating the isolation and loneliness, some people, it's actually more demoralizing for them to be pushed in with a group of other people. It's tricky because we also want to make sure that people who want to be with other people are able to be there. The role of the government, what's funded, what's regulated, what level of government, and consent of the governed. That's us. So at the end of the day, if the people really want something, governments will do it. Because if they don't, they won't be the government. And sometimes we fail to realize we just don't have enough people wanting it. That's why it's not happening. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my reflections as an advocate, which seeing how government works at the top levels. But we need to, okay, what role does government have to play in all of this? What is government going to pay for? What are we going to pay for? What's going to be regulated? Why are we regulating this? Protecting vulnerable people, yes, but what other things? There was a time when, here was the irony. We came out with was ticket scalping or something, right? So everyone was up in arms, and we're going to regulate ticket scalping. Meanwhile, we're not regulating what people can charge old people who live in independent living. But we're going to regulate how much you pay for your what's her name? Taylor. I was going to say Fleetwood Mac, but that's gives them. It's Taylor Swift now. That was the last concert I went to, I think, was Fleetwood Mac. Okay. So then what's the role of an advocate? Well, as many of you know, it's rooted in the legal system. It was always my dream to be a lawyer. I did write the LSAT. And then I went on to a career where I reported to a board of directors. I wanted to get it down to 12, so it could be like every idea is pitched to the jury, right? So I'm actually living out my dream. But are you, and I'm going to talk about who's the client, but, what is advocacy? And, what is it, the promotion? Is it about, justice, equality? What, and certainly in this role, which was and remains a legislated role, it's very clear that it is about systemic changes, not individual issues. So when I first got the job, and as you know, it was a new position at the time, I had a friend who just turned 65, and he said, I've got I'm going to come and make an appointment and come and talk to you about a few things. And I said, no, Chuck, I don't deal with individual issues. It's systemic. He said, I'm going to bring a friend. Ergo, it's systemic. But who are you advocating for? It sounds very simple. The legislation makes it seem very simple, right? People over age 65 and people in receipt of services that are primarily for seniors. Sounds easy until you get into it. Wait a minute. Who am I advocating for? The senior who's getting the service or not getting the service? Their adult child, usually a daughter, not always, who's burdened by her parents, wants something different. But I like talking to her because she's like me. We all like talking to the people who are like us. We don't realize that, but we do. What about the medical community? Because they know best, right? Is it their interest? What about the government, the administrator, the corporate suit there, whichever? Here's what we have in Canada. Usually it's pretty easy. Person paying the bill is the customer. We're complicated. Person paying the bill, not the person receiving the service. Who's your customer? Who's your client? Who are you advocating for? Whose interests take precedence? The medical community. It's fascinating. We have something called a medical order for scope of treatment. It's called a MOST form. By the way, we have 5 of them because we have 5 health authorities, and they're different. Not all of them are this bad, but it's a very significant document. When you go into the hospital, first of all, most of us don't have MOST because we don't think about it till you get old. When you go into the hospital, if there's a record on that, it's going to tell us whether we treat you, intubate you, revive you, right? It's serious. I think it's coastal. There's no room for the signature of the patient. So you say, I don't understand. Why would you? Well, because it's a medical order. Yeah, but it's about me. Yeah, no, it's our order. It's a medical order. It's for medical practitioners. But it's like, how do I know? How do you know I agree with that? Well, because somebody asked you. That's how we filled it out. Well, where have I? Because you have to sign a DNR order. And by the way, a MOST is a DNR order. So another little, in my world, we're trained not to talk about ourselves and our personal lives, but I'm not licensed anymore. So, personal. My dad, who considered dignity an overrated virtue, by the way, and was a character, and there's a whole story there. But long story short, we're in the hospital. At this point, I think he's about 83 or 84, and he's quite a character. And he had a bit of cellulitis, not a big deal. And he's mobile. My dad was active. He was still driving, whatever. Comes in. So then the doctor, so they come in and they say to him, now's the time we talk to you about your code status. He has no idea what that is. I'm just going to sit back and watch the show. So I know what's coming. By the way, I'd been in the hospital a few weeks earlier for some IV antibiotics, and nobody talked to me about my code. So we don't talk to everybody. At some point, we decide to. So we give the whole, I know what's coming, the dog and pony, we're going to, if your heart stops, we're going to do CPR, it's going to probably break your ribs, and I know how, because I know what answer we're trying to get. And you would, you want to think about, would you want that, that. So what do you say? So my dad says, well, yes, because sometimes it works, right? Yeah, sometimes it works. We're running around teaching everybody about CPR. Why are we doing it if it never works? But you don't want it if you're, I don't know what he was at that time, 78. You don't want it if you're 78. But at 38, oh yeah. We need to think about that. And absolutely in Canada, this is not just seniors care, this is healthcare writ large. The person who is deciding how much health care you get is the person paying for it, and it is not you. And if you think that is a panacea of some kind of value that is extraordinary, you're naive. You haven't been in the room where these decisions are made. And there's a calculator. So, okay, system is conflicted. Arguably, we're all conflicted, but autonomy versus safety, hard, very difficult. This conflict is very difficult. Why? Because it is very difficult to see anybody at any age put themselves at risk. But we have that fundamental right. My son can ride a motorcycle, apparently. He doesn't need my permission, Captain Young, any longer. Not that I agree that he doesn't need my permission. That's very risky. People who climb up Mount Everest, that's very risky. There's a lot of deaths climbing up Mount Everest. We don't question a person's right to do that. But their right to live in that home with that set of stairs that they have to go up to bed each night on, suddenly, no, you're gonna fall and break your hip and go to the hospital and die. Only one of those statements is actually true. They will die. When, where, how, who knows? But, at some point, and the difficult conflicts are the ones where the desire for safety is rooted in concern, in love. I've seen it. I've seen it with family members. I've seen people who they really don't really want that, but it actually is important to them for peace of mind for their family. Actually, that is okay as well. We have to be careful around pushing the message of you do what you want, does not what your family wants, which is an important message. But for some people, pleasing their family actually is the most important thing. We do need to respect that. Agency versus the needs of the publicly funded and regulated system. Right? We need regulations for certain things. And and these pendulums swing. Things get over-regulated, and then we peel back, and inevitably, when you look at the trajectory of something became regulated because something happened, right? And we think we can fix it with regulation, and then we find out regulations don't matter if nobody's enforcing them, monitoring or enforcing them, and things are still happening. That is a big conflict. The stakeholders' needs versus individual's choice. And some of the people, many, if not most of the people, so we're stakeholders, right? We have something we're doing, we're offering, we're selling, we're whatever. Individual choice may be in conflict with that. I mean, there is an argument to be made around, in some jurisdictions do a version of this, which is, I'm going to assess you, I'm going to take a look at your physical cognitive function, I'm going to look at all your banking, and I'm going to say, here's a voucher for this much money, you can decide how you want to spend it. There's an argument for that, right? If you want to really, except, wait, whoa. No. I want you to have to give them to my program. There was a version of this study done in Europe. I'm going to give you a simple version of it. Picture 10,000 to 20,000 people, 10,000 in each group. Group 1 effectively gets the voucher to hire who they want. Group 2 gets the services they need provided by the government, right? So it's the agencies or the employees or whomever that are going to provide it. Okay. We let a year go by, and we ask everybody about the quality of their services. Well, the group we gave the money to, who hired who they wanted to do what they wanted, rated the quality higher than the people who got the well-regulated government people providing their service. So our response to that was not, well, maybe we should be looking at that. I'm not joking. Our response was, well, this group must not know what quality is, because it conflicted with what we believed and what we were doing. We've medicalized the aging process, without a doubt, and you saw some of that frustration from some of the panel members yesterday. And there are many consequences that flow from medicalizing what is a natural process, aging. One is the costs accelerate. Things in the healthcare system are much more costly than things in the social care system. And it also shifts things from decision-making of the individual to decision-making of the medical system. That is much more a North American phenomenon, and even within North America, a much more Canadian phenomenon than you see in other countries. And part of it probably does link to our cultural discomfort with death and risk, right? That is much more embraced in other countries and other cultures. And flowing from that is we are financially incentivizing you as individuals to what I call behavioral conformity. That in the whole way our funding system is structured, in what government is doing to support older adults, particularly in BC. It's a little bit more acute here, but it's a version in other provinces. The best way for you to get the most subsidy from government is to go into a long-term care home. And we want you to do that. We love it. It's conform. We know where you are. We're going to tell you what to do, when to do it. The marketing brochures are going to say something different. Trust me, there's a routine there. There are people who will thrive in that environment, by the way. There are people out there who live regulated lives their entire life. They're very efficient, maybe a bit officious, but efficient. They get up every morning, they get fully dressed, they go, they have a fully cooked breakfast, they go off, everything's routine, right? They're gonna love it in the care home. Then you've got the person who, sort of wakes up, oh, I'm gonna have a cup of coffee, oh, I'm gonna read something, oh, I'm gonna drift through the day a bit, I've got a bit of a night out. No, not gonna work. But that's where they're gonna be, right? Because that's where we are financially incentivizing our seniors to go, even though it's the worst deal for us as taxpayers. And we continue to do it. So reflections as a provider, the first 20 years. First reflection is the needs of the system are paramount. The needs of our system as a provider, but we have funders, needs of the funders. Everything's driven by how we have to report. So, I dealt with health authorities, with the federal government, with provincial ministries, with obviously foundations. Everybody's got their form, everybody's got you are supposed to be able to, develop, respond to the needs of your community. Okay, and you got to report, right? And so the system is designed with the needs of the system as paramount. Even in COVID, you know, Bonnie was quite upfront about that. If you remember back, we were preventing our healthcare system from being overwhelmed. That's what we were actually doing. The way to achieve that was all of these measures we took. But the goal was to protect our healthcare system because life's not fair and needs are triaged and you can't save everybody. But we can't say that because nobody wants to hear that, right? But the needs of the system are paramount. The other observation is our ability to rationalize that what we are providing is both what you want and what you need is unbounded. We're promoters at heart. CEOs, executive directors, whatever. Now they call them presidents, chief executive, whatever. That's our job. To talk about how we're meeting this need and how we're doing all these things, and we rationalize. And we rationalize, we heard it yesterday, you know, we don't want to pick on the United Way too much. They're in the room, they give us money, or they're not going to give us money. You know, government, is it? And, you know, it's not quite as reactive as but there is, and just look at south of the border. So even if it's not happening now, without a doubt, it could happen. We love to use regulatory roadblocks when they're convenient and self-serving, and then we bemoan them when they're inconvenient, costly, or obstructing, right? So we love it when we can tell you why we can't do something because of some rule we have no control over. But when we want to do something, and there's a rule in our way, oh God, we have a different reaction. We use evidence when it supports our case, and we question the methodology when it doesn't. And I can talk about that in my most previous role, right? Everyone loves the study when it conforms with what they think, but when it doesn't, oh, suddenly the methodology. Well, wait a minute, I used the same methodology over here, and you agreed with that, right? We are amazingly comfortable in deciding how people should live. And we need to think about that, right? We need to think about that. We are amazingly comfortable. Most pronounced at the older end of the age spectrum. Every time we go in and we say, you need, okay, wait a minute, what do you want? May not be what you need, right? But we're very, very comfortable with that. Okay, so reflections on the last 10 years as an advocate. First, reflect, we care very much. British Columbians, Canadians, the world, we actually care very much about the older adults in our community. That is not the problem. People care. How we demonstrate this care, it's different, up for debate, but we care. That's key. Second observation, there is a great diversity within BC, and where you live matters as you age. And if you look at rural BC and the woman from New Brunswick, I want to say Catherine, thank you. Catherine, who was by video link, talking about parts of rural New Brunswick. I think it was the 600 and some people. That hit home. There is, without a doubt, if you live certainly in the west end of Vancouver, in an apartment, because it's probably in a building with an elevator in the west end, you're golden. Everything's nearby. When I come over, I stay with our daughter who lives in the west end, and I take the number 5 bus from Comox Street all the way down around Robson. If you haven't done it, you should. It is a revelation of life in the West End. It's very different from the SkyTrain. And then you realize why. Because it's very comfortable for people with mobility challenges actually to get on the bus. First of all, there's a bus driver, they lower the thing for you, everybody's around, everybody's kind. It's not Zoom. It's not so inviting on SkyTrain. You got to find the elevator, first of all, right? On all these other things. But there's great diversity, and where you live matters. And I should probably add to that, where your family lives matters. Those have significant influences on your ability to age on your own terms. We're wedded to the story versus the reality of the numbers, and this is where, you got a bit of a flavor of that yesterday with the stories. The media has a lot of responsibility to bear for this. One person's story is not necessarily, first of all, everybody's story, or even anybody else's story. And the other thing, and anybody who has been a boss understands this, there are also two sides to every story, which we sometimes fail to get, right? And when we look at the reason, and people, this was one of the many criticisms of me in my role. Oh, she's always banging on about the numbers. I want to hear, okay, okay, I get that. But here's the thing. The policy change will come from the numbers. Governments are going to serve the greatest good to the greatest number. They need to be more frank about that, because something can be an extreme issue to a very, very small group of people. It will get less attention than something that is a less extreme issue, but to a wider group of people. And so if you adopt the policy, a sort of, I don't know if egalitarian is the right word, but the rising tide takes all boats, you're going to bring people along. We're never going to get it perfect. But when we don't want to acknowledge that, yes, this is a problem, but there's other bigger problems. Sometimes the bigger problems, bigger in terms of more people affected. We don't solve those bigger problems. And I can't tell you how many times I would be meeting with people, often with the health authorities, and I'd be telling them something, they'd be telling me about what they're doing, right? What we're doing then. And I would say, if any of that was working, these numbers would look different. They had to acknowledge that. But we let people off the hook by simply telling us what they're doing. And sometimes what we say we're doing and what we're doing is not the same. I may be frail, but I'm not a failure. We have to be careful. Without a doubt, we should be promoting people's, taking care of themselves, eat the right food, get the exercise, socialize, take the scatter rugs up, put the grab bars on, all of that stuff. You can do all of that and still develop frailty. And my concern is that we are going to make people who develop frailty feel as though they have failed, because we're giving out this message that somehow it can be avoided. It can, for some of these things, will avoid it for some people, without a doubt. But you can do all that and still develop Parkinson's, macular degeneration, rheumatoid arthritis, peripheral neuropathy. All of these things can still be visited upon you. You do everything. And so we need to be careful about that, because people will also think, well, I'm doing all these things, so this can never happen to me. Actually, that's not true. Announcing something is easy, carrying through is hard, and progress needs to be quantified and measured. Now, I worked under two governments that want to tell you they're very different from each other. Well, I'm here to say they're not as different as they want to think they are, and they want you to think they are. In part because underneath the sort of, 150 people that change when the government changes are 30,000 people that don't change, right? And on a day-to-day basis, just think about, after the government changed, what was different for you personally the next day, and the day after, and the day after, right? And we announce things. Governments, and it's both. So this is not an attack on the current government, because this applies to, they love to announce something. The sector lets itself get used a little bit in this endeavor of, it looks like we're doing something. They love to give a one-time grant, and I heard a lot about that. because we can announce that it can look like it's doing something, and British Columbians writ large, most of whom are never affected by any of this, will believe we're doing something, right? You've got to measure the progress, and this was talked about yesterday, the evaluation. How do you know if something's working if you don't evaluate it, measure it, quantify it? And some of the things, sometimes the evaluations are a bit rationalized, yeah. And that's where the self-interest comes into play. And it is an interesting thing I noticed between care homes that were operated by health authorities and care homes that were operated by contracted providers. So regardless, actually, of whether the contracted provider was a private company or not-for-profit. So I'd come out with something and it would show some problem in care home, right, whatever, like decubitus ulcer, whatever, aggression, not distinguishing between operator type. The health authorities, they'd want to meet. They'd want to know the data. They'd want to know how they could make better. They would want to know how they could improve. The other group were all talking about how it didn't apply to them. And the difference is, when you're the government running a care home, like you're not there's no, your incentive is to sort of get a bit bet, right? Versus our incentive is to describe what we're doing as great. We can't describe it as anything but great because we're worried we're going to lose the funding. That's not a good way to do. Doing the wrong thing, but for the right reasons, and discomfort for risk. And we did see a little bit of that in COVID, and a little bit with how we managed our care homes, certainly in the last part of the pandemic. British Columbia did have the most restricted care home policy across the country, and we kept it in place for a very long time. And so many of you will have heard me reference this before. So the numbers who died from COVID looked a little low, except the number who died overall wasn't actually any less. 800 people died from COVID, 8,000 people died same time frame from something other than COVID and didn't get to spend any time with their family. The right reason? Yeah. Wrong thing? The seniors industrial complex, or that I could call it the healthcare industrial complex, some of you will remember this, most of you are probably too young. Technically, I'm actually too young for this too, but Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, when he left office in 1960, I guess it was, in his address to the US people, he talked about the military industrial complex. In a nutshell, what he was saying is, be very wary of the men who encourage you to go to war when they are the people who will benefit from you going to war. That's it in a nutshell. That exists out there in healthcare, and the subset of that is seniors care. Be wary of, the other analogy is, the music man comes to town. You've got a problem right here in River City, and by the way, I can fix it for you. There's a lot of that out there, and we've got to be a little bit careful about that. Everybody's got the newest mousetrap, and it's better than, okay, well, let's just take a look at that. And significant change is almost always incremental. We don't think that because we only talk in superlatives, right? Nothing's ever a problem. It's always a crisis. No one ever has a headache. They have a migraine. Right? And on it goes. And the problem with that, because then, we're going to have this bold solution, this audacious solution, think big, be bold, moonshot, a paradigm shift, okay, stop. It's little baby steps. That's how progress happens. There's never a light switch that goes on. When I reflect back to what things were when I started 30 years ago, there's been tremendous progress. Did we think of that at any point along the 30-year continuum? Not really. 30 years ago, 2 to a room was novel. It was 4-bed wards. And by the way, we tied them up at night for their own good. We've made tremendous progress. When we think about what you can have at home now, we can bring in lifts. We do chemotherapy. We do dialysis at home, right? Compared to, we've made tremendous progress, but it's been incremental. Not this, hoping for this suddenly, cataclysmic happening that's going to solve all our problems. It's not going to happen. So reflections as I age. The next 35 years or more. For the record, I'm 1 year older than Kamala Harris and our Prime Minister, and 1 year younger than Tom Cruise. I've got... First observation, though, is that the next 30 years will be much different from the last 30 years. So I'm 61. So if I think about when I was 31 or 35 years ago, when I was like 26, so 26 is probably a better age, because at that point it was just my husband and myself. We didn't have any kids yet, and we're back to that. I played tennis, I skied, I ran. I do all that now. And I actually don't even realize I don't do it as fast. It doesn't compete because come to us, do all that. In 30 years, 35 years from now, when I'm 96, I don't think so, right? There is an acceleration that I'm very much aware of. The other reflection is the bard of my people, right? Rabbi, we call him, Rabbi Burns, the best laid plans of mice and men often gan agley. You can plan, but shit happens. And you think you can predict, but there's very much not in your control. And so what I've learned is understand what I can control, right? Plan. And there is an element of sort of try to make each day count a little bit. You never know when it's going to be your last, but a bit of that. Okay, enough about me. What about the policy changes? So when I think about the next the 35 years, demographic shift is going to continue. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. In economics, we have something called a dependency ratio. And what the dependency ratio measures is the two ends of the age spectrum, kids and old people, because the people in the middle have to pay to take care of them. If you look, again, if I was better, I have a brilliant slide. I couldn't figure out how to make it. But basically, it showed the dependency ratio in 1971 and then showed it in 2024. Here's the long story short. Group in the middle hasn't changed. So we've gone from something like 20% of our population was under the age of 15 and 8% was over 65. We've flipped it. But the group in the middle that we're depending on, percentage-wise, is only off by 1%. It's basically the same. So yes, this apocalyptic economy, we think, from taking care of all these old people, whoa, just a minute here. We're not educating all these young people anymore. So we're relieved of that cost. And here's the great thing about immigrants. They come to our country, someone else paid to educate them. It's the best deal going, right? It is also, we clearly are going to need immigration, but, let's dial down this hysteria a bit about overall economic Armageddon from the aging population, and then let's dial down this, like somehow it's the fault of the people that they're older and costing this money, and we're spending less on because there's few, anyhow, that is a whole other keynote. The retirement age. Canada has one of the youngest retirement ages and one of the highest life expectancies. That has an actuarial challenge to it. We are going to have to address that. Even the US has raised it. So in the US, you need to be 66 to get your full Social Security, and they're going to raise it to 67. Denmark's looking at going up to 70. They're 67 now. The motherland, the UK, it's 67, and they've equalized retirement ages for men and women now, We're going to have to address that. You could argue the government's doing it through another way. So one way is you can't collect your pension until you're this age and you raise the age. The way they seem to be approaching it is if you wait to collect your pension, you'll get more, right? So that's why you see this, defer your CPP, defer your OAS. And pensions overall, a huge shift. We have not yet felt the effect of it. We probably won't feel this effect for about 20 years. And this is the shift from large groups of people being under defined benefit or even defined contribution, but company pension plans that they paid into, so they have good pensions in addition to their government pensions. That's shifting. And we know from the savings data that people are not taking their contract rate and putting aside the 20% that gets put aside when you're an employee. When I last had to run a payroll, the contributions to the municipal pension plan from the employer were 9%, and from the employer was 7%. So that's 16% of my paycheck. Another 5% was CPP. So that's 21% of my income actually went into a pension. Or 20 of which I contributed about half of it, a little bit less. That's all shifted. So these people in their 30s and 40s and even their 50s, when they are now in their 80s and beyond, they're not going to have these pensions. The labor market, two aspects to the labor market. The type of jobs. So the demographic shift is, I wouldn't say wreaking havoc, I would say it's recalibrating the types of jobs, along with all of the other things that are recalibrating the types of jobs. So, you know, our modern day industrial revolution, which is our revolution with technology, whether it's AI, automation, or whatever, okay, that's one influence. The other influence is we're not going to need the teachers, right? We are going to need the caregivers, so there's that. Then there's the supply. And Canada needs immigrants. You cannot, I mean, Andrew does a lot of work on the demography of Canada, and the department has a good book that talks about, and you can look at the numbers. We are going to need immigrants because that's 66% that's holding up the dependency ratio. We need to keep that constant, and we're not going to keep it constant with our birth rate or anywhere near to it. And so we're going to have to wrestle with this, because we kind of forgot that we got to have houses for people. Okay, so that's caused a problem. There will be a reaction to this reduction of immigrants that we're going through. It doesn't happen overnight, but you are going to see as an economist, the first thing you're going to see is wages are going to have to rise, because immigrants generally do the low-wage jobs. So one of the papers I did when I was in graduate school was minimum wage, friend or foe. Anyhow, long story short, people who bemoan minimum wage going up, it's irrelevant, because governments tend to only raise minimum wage in good economic times, and most people aren't earning anywhere near minimum wage. In fact, I think it's 7% of BC's labor force works at minimum wage. So a little fact check there. That's not going to, 20 cents an hour more for 7 or 8% of the labor force is not going to turn the world upside down. So what we're going to see is you're going to pay a lot more for a cup of coffee. Anybody who's been in these Nordic countries, which have an interesting phenomenon, very high standards of living, very high wages, low immigration. A cup of coffee costs a lot of money, right? So we're going to see that, and then we're going to see, I got to pay more for the care aid. And that's going to have a knock-on effect on individuals, on the system. So there's the labor market, the immigration. Taxes. Here's an interesting thing. So when you look at incomes, which is where we take the tax from, incomes drop dramatically in retirement. So the median wage of a person 65 and older is about call it 36,000. And the median wage of the mass of the working age population is pretty much double that. So in our income tax system, which is progressive, you pay little to no tax on your low earnings and then more, right? So fewer people are going to have the incomes at the higher end to get those taxes from. So where is it going to come from, right? Because the incomes are dropping. In GDP, which is our gross domestic product, there's going to be an impact because older people don't buy durable goods. We're not buying new cars, new refrigerators, anything like that, right? And all of that feeds into our GDP. So there's going to be an overall effect. And land use, the built environments, the densification, transit, rural, all of that, got 2 minutes, all of that's going to have to change because right now the oldest boomer is only turning 79 this year, I think. So all of these things are yet to really see their potential. So that is going to be interesting to watch. And then in closing, last slide, one of my favorite poems, I put the whole poem up if I could. I encourage you to read it if you haven't, Ulysses by Alfred Tennyson, old guy. I love everything old. I live in an old house. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved heaven and earth, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And with that, back over to you.
Thank you, Isobel, for that wonderful presentation. That's got us all thinking very deeply and setting up many challenges for all of us as we move forward in our careers and education. I let you go a little bit over because I was afraid to stop you, quite frankly, to be honest. So we have time for maybe one quick question, short one or two short ones. Anybody want to jump in?
It'll be provocative if we're not going to be able to tax older adults' incomes because their incomes are low. Would you be a proponent for higher wealth taxes?
There's only one, well, there's not only one place the money comes from. That's, that's a bit contrite. Money does come from production within the economy as well as from the taxpayers. But at the end of the day, more people are going to need services that are going to cost more. If we only had one of those phenomenon, that would be a challenge enough, more people. The cost of providing those services is going to go up beyond the rate of inflation for the reasons I described about the knock-on effect of our demographics and our the shifts in the jobs. And so we are going to have to address that, and that is what is the role and responsibility of the individual. And what governments don't want to talk about this asset test. They don't want to talk about effectively what could be a federal estate probate fee would be another way to deal with it. But what I get concerned about and what I saw from the government side is here is the problem. Forget the people who bang on about all these wealthy people and they got the home and they're I've had enough of them. Yes, some people. 1 out of 5 Canadians and British Columbians that are over the age of 65 don't have a home and they're pretty poor. And we're treating them exactly the same as the person sitting in the $2 million home who doesn't have a high income either. And that is a problem. And it's a problem that has an underlying cauldron boiling over of resentment amongst young people, in part because we won't touch it, right? So if we, and then when you try to talk about the home, here's what happens. So all those young people suddenly say, whoa, 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 that's my mom and dad's house. The other thing that happens, and I've seen it, where's my council of advisors? Not you guys, this was from another group. Oh yeah, she's making sense. And then suddenly the light bulb goes on. Wait, shit, she's talking about my house. No, 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 no. Right? Governments have to be elected at the end of the day. We have to get to the point where we will give them the license to tackle that. Because you're right. Yes, so the answer to your question is yes. I absolutely believe. I think the easiest way is a national probate fee. We have a provincial one. It could be a lot higher. I tried to tell them that. I said if you increased it by 0.5% every year, suddenly, you know, it's 8%, but incrementally, and it's a lot of money we would get every year. We'll do it.
Please join me in thanking Isobel for that provocative talk.